Thanks so much for your time. I am Pius Kojobak. I look now at our stories. The International Monetary Fund is projecting a growth rate of 4% for the country by the end of this year. And this was captured in the Regional Outlook report released by the International Monetary Fund today in Washington, D.C. And I want us to go live to Washington, D.C. and speak to our man, George Yafe, who has been following up developments in that space for us. George, and thanks so much for joining me. Now, what is the basis for this projection?
Well, Pius, even before I give you more details about the basis for this projection, a quick clarity is that apparently government also projected a 4% growth rate at the end of this year. So it appears that it's actually in sync with what government has projected for this year. Well, the fund still believes that the ongoing reforms that Ghana is actually undertaking could actually impact on growth in terms of expansion. And one can talk about the government's quest to actually target spending in some critical areas of the economy, and that is why it could end up this. Now, a while ago, Pius, the head of the African Department, Baby Selassie, he had been speaking at a press conference, and he actually also warned that even though there is push for cuts during these times, we should be careful on how we go about these cuts because it has implications on growth and the expansion of the economy. Let's watch him as he explains why he believes that we need to be very strategic in any efforts to bring in an expenditure because of its impact on the larger economy.
Impressed by how much reforms have been undertaken in recent years, most notably trying to go to the heart of the cause of the macroeconomic imbalances in Nigeria, which, of course, are related to the fact that oil subsidies were taking up a very large share of the limited tax revenues that the government have, and not necessarily being used in the most effective way to help the most vulnerable people. The issues related to the imbalances in the external side, with the exchange rate extremely out of line. So it's been really good to see the government taking these on head-on, address those, and also beginning to roll out the third component of the reforms that we've been advocating for, and of course, the government has been pursuing, which is to expand social protection, to target generalized subsidies and to help the most vulnerable. This has all been very good to see.
So, George, we just watched Baby Selassie give us that, insight. But what more, as the IMF is saying, in terms of sustaining this 4% growth they are projecting?
No, I mean, they believe that this will come with some tough measures as well. And we really need to up our game when it comes to the area of taxes, the area of spending, and also trying to bring everyone on board when it comes to how we can stabilize things. I mean, this question basically that he previously answered was in relation to Ghana and Nigeria, in terms of the fact that when it comes to those proposals that they have put forward, it's quite similar between those countries and what the fund is asking Ghana to do and what the fund is also asking Nigeria to do. Let's also again listen to Baby Selassie also making further suggestions on what we can do to try and stabilize things.
Growth has been driven by public spending, public investment for many years. That, of course, has made major contribution. It has facilitated all the investment that we've seen in infrastructure, building schools, building clinics. So that has a role to play. But I would say that going forward, it will be as important to see if we can find ways in which the private sector is the main engine of growth.
All right, so let's make sense out of all of these numbers and, of course, the jargons there, and get onto Zoom and speak with economist Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie for his perspective on this matter. Thanks so much, sir, for agreeing to speak to us on Business Live. First off, what do you make of this revised GDP forecast by the IMF? 4% they are saying.
Yes, I think the 4.0% projection is the same as what the government put across in the 2025 budget. Maybe if you are talking about a downward revision, you may be making reference to the 2024 actual, which was around 6%, which has been revised downwards to 4.0%. And we know the reason as espoused by George and the other colleague, is the cut in government expenditure, which has implications on growth. Remember that in the words of the finance minister, they said that they were going to pursue expenditure-led fiscal consolidation. In other words, they're going to cut expenditure. There are two ways of bridging the gap between revenue and expenditure, and they are choosing the option of cutting down expenditure. So this year, they cut expenditure down by some 10 billion Ghana cedis. And anytime the government spends, it impacts on the economy up to 42%. So when there's a cut, this huge cut in government expenditure, the impact on the economy will be negative on growth rate. So that's why we've seen this downward revision from the 2024 actual of 6% to the 4.0%. The Bank of Ghana is also pursuing tight monetary policy. So both the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana this year are pursuing tight fiscal policy, that is to cut down expenditure. And the Bank of Ghana is also pursuing tight monetary policy, that is to up the monetary policy rate. We just saw in their last meeting that they raised the policy rate by 100 basis points from 27% to 28%. So in a nutshell, this year is a stability year. I think that a number of issues were raised by the previous administration, NPP. They started this fiscal consolidation. Of course, remember that they started the IMF program. So the NDC government has come to continue the fiscal consolidation path that was started by the NPP within the IMF program. And so the whole idea is to stabilize the economy up to the end of the IMF program, which is somewhere April 2026. And therefore, after 2026, when we have achieved some stability, then that is the point to start thinking about expanding growth and to create jobs, and etc. But I must say that I am happy about the social protection. I think the IMF has commended the government of Ghana, NPP government, they commended them, NDC government, they are still commending them for protecting the poor and the vulnerable in society in the midst of fiscal consolidation, when you are raising taxes, when you are raising tariffs, water tariffs, electricity tariffs, and etc. These will have their consequences on the poor and the vulnerable, so they must be protected. So the investment into the social protection programs like livelihood empowerment against poverty, NHIS, school feeding program, free SHS, all these things are very good to protect the poor and the vulnerable in society. And the government is not making so much investment in terms of public investment. So they are leaving everything, almost everything, into the hands of the private sector for this year. That's why they are so focused on stability, because the private sector thrives on stability. Stability will mean low and stable inflation, low and stable exchange rate, low and stable interest rate. When these things, these variables are low and stable, the private sector will thrive. So the government's vision is they know that they cannot invest in the public sector much. So they are leaving most of the job to be done by the private sector, and they are also pursuing stability so that the private sector can stand on the stability and then invest more. So that they can
interestingly, Dr. Ususako, this is slightly lower than government's growth projection and, of course, higher than the World Bank. And I'm wondering whether you are surprised. But again, does this mean that the IMF is more optimistic about the growth prospects of the economy going forward?
Well, I have indicated that the government also projected 4.0 in the 2025 budget. So if the IMF is projecting 4.0, it's the same. And I also said that maybe what we think of downward revision, because the 2024 actual was 6%, and the 2025 projection is 4.0%. And the reason is that, the tight fiscal and tight monetary policies, these are the main reasons for the downward revision from 2024 actual of 6% to 2025 projection of 4.0%. But the 4.0% is just a projection. It is likely, or it can happen, that the Minister of Finance will come to the floor of Parliament in July and revise it, either upwards or downwards. So this is a projection. But I must also say that the Minister of Finance, Dr. Kase Atoforsen, indicated that it is better for their government to project a lower figure and achieve a higher figure than to project a higher figure and achieve a lower figure. Because he's thinking of what the opponents will do to them when they project maybe 7% and they achieve 5%.
Yeah.
But politically they will be happy if they project 4% and they achieve 4.2. Even if they achieve 4.1, they will say, hooray, we have done better than we projected.
Absolutely. But in all of these, how do we manage these positive sentiments?
I think the sentiments in the economy is good. I am very happy to see the cedi stabilized. I think the cumulative depreciation is less than 5% since the beginning of the year, which is something good because we know how exchange rate feeds into inflation and the total cost of living. So the sentiments in the country is good. The atmosphere is good. The conditions are good. We are also hoping that government will succeed in the external debt restructuring. Hopefully, when we are successful, we will save about $10 billion in that angle. So let's continue. I think the onus is on all of us, the government, civil society organizations, those of us in academia, and the government in general to continue to pursue this fiscal discipline. And I think what is really may disturb us is the energy sector. I think we have to try and resolve all those. I've seen a number of reforms that the government expects to achieve or to do in the energy sector. So much that we don't want to experience doomsday because we know what doomsday did to our small enterprises in the year 2015 to 2016. So we have to manage the energy sector and also pursue local production. So three things: still continue to protect the poor and the vulnerable, manage the energy sector, reform the energy sector, and also pursue local production so that whatever happens in the global environment, we know we are pushing and we are secured with local production. If whoever is fighting, if we have local production, then we wouldn't care so much about the global or the external factors. But if you don't produce locally, then whatever happens in Israel or Palestine or Ukraine or Russia, then it will affect you negatively. So we have to do these three things: pursue local production, reform the energy sector, and continue to protect the poor and the vulnerable. And hopefully, if we continue with the stability, then by 2026, the government can expand more and grow to create jobs that we are all craving for.
Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie, I truly appreciate your time and input at this very moment. Very insightful. Great to have you on. Let's shift focus to some other stories. Banking consultant Dr. Richard Tahini is entreating commercial banks to conduct lifestyle audits of bank staff to clamp down on fraud in the banking sector. His suggestion follows reports by the Bank of Ghana that there was a 33% rise in staff involved in fraud in 2024. Now, speaking to Joy News, Dr. Tahini called for more punitive measures from the Bank of Ghana and commercial banks to reduce the menace.
In banking, we have laws. We have laws and we have practices.
Right.
And we have international practices. I went to a court. Let me give you a story.
Right.
There was a letters of credit issue with one of the banks and a customer. I was subpoenaed when I was banking college to come and explain what a defer LC, what a site LC, what was a acceptance LC to the court, because the lawyers were just debating. And when I went there and I told the lady, the court, the judge, I made a presentation and explained to him, was yes, this is the people we are looking for,
right,
to come and tell us what is it. There's one thing in banking, it's so unique, but unfortunately in Ghana, we don't see it as a uniqueness in it. And so people who specialize in the general law, and they may not even understand what it means as the banking law is concerned. So I tell you, my brother, I have been it, and I teach it now. I teach it when I left, and I could see that people who sit in a bank and will be buying Uber for people to drive. But when you look at their salary, you can't work out how they are siphoning monies from the system. I mean, as recent as this year, if you remember, a boy at one of the leading banks was having due 101.2 billion.
Yes.
He was about to travel to Dubai, and at the airport, he was nicked and he has been sentenced to 10 years. If this guy has sneaked away what would have been it, the bank would have lost it.
Even though this same person on social media had displayed lavish lifestyle, even though he was working to just earn a monthly salary.
Exactly.
And nobody took notice of it.
And nobody takes a look at you. But when we came in the bank in the 80s, my manager would always want to find out, Mr. Tahini, what did you do? Okay. Because if I need rent, I had to go and get a loan to pay. But people who start buying, they haven't collected mortgages. Why are they getting the money for? And nobody is looking at them.
This is still Business Life. We have more for you after this break. To Business Life, the Africa Center for Energy Policy, ICEP, has commended government for its decision to grant a 12-month extension of the diamond mine lease to Aboso Goldfields Limited. In a release, the energy policy think tank also expressed contentment over government's move to appoint a transition team, but cautioned government to be circumspect on the selection of partners. More in this report.
Demonstrated by the government. Report explained that the action demonstrated by the government will send positive signals to the investor community, aligning with ICEP's call. It, however, charged government to demonstrate transparency during the transition period and ensure the participation of competent agencies and companies. Citing the Minerals Income Investment Fund's lack of operational readiness to manage a mine of this scale, ICEP called on government to ensure that companies with the financial muscle and experience are considered, bearing in mind the capital-intensive nature of mining. It concluded by recommending that government stagger its equity acquisition and strategically share the risk with an experienced investor, as the diamond mine will require over $600 million in additional capital to keep it operational.
The administrator of the Minerals Development Fund, Dr. Hannah Louisa Bisil Kote, has urged stakeholders in the mining sector to establish a dedicated task force to monitor corporate social responsibility efforts and implement the polluter pays principles. Now, speaking at a stakeholder forum, she emphasized that such a task force would help ensure quality and greater transparency in profit declaration by mining companies and hold them accountable for environmental damage.
We also are into partnership with some other business entities. They want to invest, is where to trust. And they've shown trust in Mineral Development Fund. So this year they'll be training about 1,500 young people, both men, male, female, and people living disability in these mining communities, you know, in fabrication or manufacturing of drones for agricultural purposes. They'll be using it to spraying the lands and stuff. We are going to do the fish farm and aquaculture. You know, the life in water bodies gone now, so we've gotten off-takers, and so we're going to train 1,000 of these young ones this year. Each one will have a startup kit, and they will start, and we have technical people monitoring. We will be putting up the 100,000 aquaculture farm, fish farm, with the processing plant. So all these ones will come through that. We already have the off-taker who will be taken from these ones. So when we go into the Nkoko Nkete, we are going to involve also the mining communities to off-take these the Nkoko when they grow. I mean, when they are matured to hit the market. We'll be looking at the two fronts. We'll be looking at broilers and layers. Broilers 35 days, the child knows that once it is done well, when I say child, they should forgive me, but the young one, they know that once it's done and it's done properly, they will have about 45% to 50% profit, which is very good.
And that's it for Business Life for today. I am Pius Kojobaka. We have more stories for you when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Beyond the Numbers is next.